The courthouse lobby fell silent when a frightened little girl ran through the crowd, clung to the leg of a tired single father, and refused to let go. Security guards hurried toward them while anxious voices filled the air. Without hesitation, the man rested a reassuring hand on the child's shoulder and quietly said, "She's with me." He had never seen her before in his life. He had no idea who she was, why she had chosen him, or how that single sentence would change both of their lives forever. If you believe in kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to our channel. Every act of support helps our community continue sharing emotional stories that remind us how one compassionate choice can change everything. Graham Mercer had learned long ago that life rarely rewarded good people quickly. At 38, he was raising his 8-year-old daughter, Elsie, alone after losing his wife, Marin, to a sudden illness 5 years earlier. Since then, every morning had become a carefully balanced routine of school lunches, laundry, work schedules, overdue bills, and comforting a little girl who still whispered goodnight to a framed photograph before going to sleep. Graham worked as a maintenance supervisor for the county parks department, a job that paid modestly but honestly. His clothes were usually clean but worn, his hands carried permanent scratches from repairing playground equipment, and the lines around his eyes seemed older than his years. Yet despite every hardship, he never allowed bitterness to settle inside him. Elsie often told people that her father could fix broken swings, broken pipes, and sometimes even broken hearts. That Tuesday morning, Graham had been called to the courthouse to settle guardianship paperwork concerning a distant elderly aunt who had recently passed away. The matter was expected to take less than an hour before he returned to work. He never imagined that the routine visit would become the most unforgettable day of his life. The little girl who wrapped herself around his leg looked no older than 6. Her blonde curls were tangled, her jacket was dusty, and her tiny hands trembled so violently that Graham could feel every shake through the fabric of his jeans. She refused to look at anyone except him. Security officers approached carefully, assuming she had become separated from her parents. Before anyone could reach her, a sharply dressed woman hurried across the lobby calling the girl's name. Relief briefly crossed the woman's face before it was replaced by something Graham could not quite explain. It wasn't warmth. It wasn't panic. It was calculation. The child buried her face deeper against Graham's side. The woman smiled politely at the officers and explained that the girl was her niece, Violet, who had wandered away while waiting for a family hearing. Everything sounded reasonable. Yet the little girl's terrified grip tightened even more. Graham looked down into frightened blue eyes filled with silent pleading. Years of raising Elsie had taught him that children often revealed truth before they could explain it. Instead of forcing the child away, he calmly asked that everyone slow down for a moment. The security supervisor noticed the girl's obvious distress and suggested moving everyone into a nearby family interview room where child services personnel already working inside the courthouse could help determine what was happening. Inside the quiet room, Violet still refused to release Graham's hand. A child advocate gently knelt beside her and spent several patient minutes speaking softly until the frightened little girl finally whispered enough words to change the direction of the entire afternoon. She explained that the woman claiming to be her aunt was actually her mother's cousin. After Violet's parents had died in a highway accident months earlier, several relatives began arguing over custody. At first she believed they wanted to love her. Instead, she overheard repeated conversations about trust funds, insurance payments, and selling her parents' home. The adults smiled whenever social workers visited but argued constantly afterward. Earlier that morning she had heard someone say that once another signature was completed, everything would finally belong to the family. She did not fully understand the legal language. She only understood that nobody seemed to be talking about her. Only about money. When the hearing ended, she saw Graham comforting his own daughter in the courthouse hallway after Elsie became nervous about being inside such a serious building. Graham had hugged his daughter with such quiet patience that something inside Violet instantly recognized safety. When she found herself briefly alone in the crowded lobby, she ran toward the only person who looked like a father. The room became painfully quiet. The woman strongly denied every accusation, insisting the frightened child had misunderstood ordinary adult conversations. She insisted the family had sacrificed everything to care for Violet. The child advocate listened carefully to both sides without rushing to judgment. Rather than making assumptions, she requested additional interviews and temporarily postponed the custody recommendation until a more complete investigation could be conducted. Graham expected his role to end there. Instead, the advocate asked whether he would be willing to remain another hour because Violet refused to calm down unless he stayed nearby. He agreed immediately. Elsie spent that hour coloring pictures with Violet in the waiting area while Graham quietly answered questions from investigators. He described exactly what had happened without exaggeration or accusation. He simply told the truth. Sometimes the truth was enough. Over the following weeks, investigators uncovered financial records showing that several relatives had indeed discussed the child's inheritance far more often than her emotional well-being. None of it proved criminal intent, but it raised enough concerns for the court to reconsider permanent placement. Meanwhile, something unexpected happened. Violet repeatedly asked whether she could visit Graham and Elsie. The social workers noticed how naturally the girls laughed together. Elsie, who had spent years wishing for a sibling, happily shared her favorite books, bicycle, and backyard treehouse. Graham never tried to replace Violet's parents or influence the legal process. He simply offered kindness whenever the professionals arranged supervised visits. For the first time since losing her family, Violet began smiling without forcing it. The county councilor later remarked that children often sense genuine safety long before adults recognized it. Months passed. The court continued searching for the most stable long-term solution. Several extended relatives withdrew their custody requests once strict financial oversight became part of the process. Others admitted they simply lacked the resources to raise another child. Eventually, one difficult question remained. Would Graham consider becoming Violet's foster parent while permanent arrangements continued? The proposal terrified him. He already struggled financially. Every grocery bill required planning. Every unexpected expense meant sacrificing something else. Yet every time he imagined saying no, he remembered the tiny voice saying nothing at all while desperately holding his leg inside the courthouse. He discussed everything honestly with Elsie. Rather than answering immediately, she quietly disappeared into her bedroom. Minutes later she returned carrying one of her favorite stuffed bears. She smiled shyly and explained that Violet could have it because sisters should never sleep alone when they feel scared. Graham felt tears forming before he even realized he was crying. He accepted the placement. The following year demanded extraordinary patience. There were counseling appointments, school adjustments, painful anniversaries, and countless moments when grief unexpectedly resurfaced. Violet sometimes woke from nightmares convinced everyone she loved would disappear again. Graham never promised impossible things. Instead, he promised something he could actually keep. He promised that whenever she became frightened, she would never have to face it by herself. Little by little, healing replaced fear. Elsie became the protective older sister she had always imagined being. They argued about toys, laughed over burnt pancakes, raced bicycles through neighborhood parks, and gradually created the ordinary childhood memories that grief had almost stolen forever. Even Graham changed. For years he believed surviving each day was enough. Now he realized living meant opening your heart even when it had already been broken. Several years later, the courthouse invited families whose adoption stories had begun there to participate in a community celebration recognizing foster parents, child advocates, and volunteers. Graham almost declined. He disliked public attention. But Violet insisted. Standing in the same lobby where everything had begun, she quietly took Graham's hand exactly as she had years before. This time she was smiling. When asked what she remembered most about that frightening day, she did not mention lawyers, hearings, or inheritance. She remembered one calm sentence. "She's with me." Those 3 words had become the bridge between fear and belonging. Before we finish this story, we'd love to hear from you. Please leave a meaningful comment telling us whether you believe one small act of kindness can completely change someone's future, or share a moment when compassion made a difference in your own life. As the celebration ended beneath the warm afternoon sunlight, Graham watched Violet and Elsie race across the courthouse lawn, laughing so hard they could barely stay on their feet. The weight he had carried for so many lonely years no longer felt unbearable. His family had not been built through perfect plans or easy circumstances. It had been built through courage, patience, honesty, and one instinctive decision to protect a frightened child he did not even know. Sometimes family begins with birth, sometimes with marriage, and sometimes with a single moment when someone chooses compassion instead of convenience. The greatest miracles are often not loud or dramatic. They begin with ordinary people making extraordinary choices when nobody expects them to. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. May this story remind you that even in life's most uncertain moments, kindness has the power to create family, heal broken hearts, and give someone the second chance they never believed they would find.